We all love a good rumor, but sometimes you get it straight from the horse's mouth. And in this case, the Winnipeg Jets have basically mentioned that a lot of the players are having motivation issues, as Rick Bowness has kind of put the team on blast. He mentioned a number of times that players don't really seem to be with the program entirely, and that he is trying to figure out ways to get them going again. We'll dive into both sides of this conflict and what it means for the Winnipeg Jets on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
Or Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And also, YouTube. As you can tell, we have a video version, and we just love and appreciate your support. Now, like I said at the top of the episode, the biggest thing that I think has come out of the past 24 hours or so is Rick Bowness talking about the Winnipeg Jets and some major issues that he's having with the locker room. In particular, I think we can all agree that the Jets haven't looked particularly motivated over the past couple of weeks. Despite having the season still very much in the balance, still very much left to fight for, when you look at the guys on the ice, tell me something. Do they look happy to you? From my perspective, they all kind of look either disengaged, a bit pissed off, glum, and none of that is surprising, right? We're going to dive into this from two different perspectives. We're going to talk about, the player's perspective and management's perspective, because I don't think just blaming the players is fair here. While they certainly bear a lot of the responsibility, I think we can also admit that the players should have reasonable cause to be kind of irritated. Let's talk about the last 4 to 5 years, right? Winnipeg, for the past several seasons, has basically spun its wheels. We all know that the Jets basically went on one cup run, and that was kind of it. That 2017-2018 season, we all know, was magical. And in that time, what do you think was the sort of prevailing sentiment? If you kept hearing that the Jets could become the next great NHL dynasty, congrats, because we all did. It was even on the hockey news. But maybe some of you were still a bit cynical. But if you ask just about anyone, I think we all were expecting Winnipeg to, yes, maybe take a step back in, subsequent seasons, but still be a pretty dang good team. Instead, the Jets just sort of tailed off every year after that, to the point where they looked more like the Detroit Red Wings than they did the Winnipeg Jets. And if you're a player, if you've committed long-term to Winnipeg, or if you've been drafted by this team, signed any sort of extension over the past couple of years, yada, 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 you are playing some part of your lifespan for this franchise that hasn't really shown that it's willing to invest back into the team in the way that it needs to. In some ways, Winnipeg has tried to shore up, depth issues, maybe sign a few cheap free agents, go bargain hunting for guys like, Niederreiter recently. But even then, like, Nino was probably one of the biggest moves the Jets have made in terms of pure acquisitions. Every time they trade for somebody, it's usually like a Nate Schmidt or Brendan Dillon, and both of those guys have, in varying capacities, been important players for the team. But beyond that, right, do you really recall the last time the Jets made a major acquisition without sending out a really disgruntled player? For the most part, every time the Jets make some sort of a blockbuster deal, it's just because somebody on the team is pissed off and they need to get rid of a problem child. Otherwise, the Jets, for the most part, are not really a team that makes a lot of major moves. And so if you're a player and you're thinking to yourself, what is the next stage for this squad to reach the Stanley Cup playoffs and win a cup? You're not really seeing very many of those stairs being laid out before you if you're a member of the Jets. And it really sucks to say, because I look at this team and all I can see is potential. Winnipeg has so much potential, and it drives me crazy because I love this team and I think it could be so much more and so much better, but constantly we're seeing them being hamstrung by lineup decisions, by roster construction issues, and by various salary internal stuff and budgeting, right? And look, I totally get it. Winnipeg has unique challenges that many other big market teams don't. I don't think anyone is ever going to refute that. But by the same token, right, at least figure out something with this team that could have been a massive, massive pool for continued sellouts, for big playoff revenues, for continued TV revenues. This Jets team really should be doing more than it is, but it feels like we're only seeing a fraction of the full resources behind it, and it feels like the front office is tightening on the purse strings again. And look, COVID did change a lot for many teams, many sports franchises, and just people in general. So in that respect, I don't hold True North, accountable for that. I don't think that's fair. I think COVID did a number on their finances. We all get that. But by the same token, you still have plenty of resources to try and at least chase maybe just one big fish, give the fans something to be excited about, and more importantly, give the players something to be excited about. We have all of these guys who are going to be up for contract extensions, and how many of them do you think want to come back to this team? If I were Hellebuck, I'd be looking to hit the highway because so far the Jets haven't really looked any closer to winning a cup than they were in 2017, 2018. They were darn close back then, and since then they've been so far away that it might as well be a joke of a discussion. So if you're the players, why would you feel motivated to try on the ice? Why would you want to fight every single shift when you just know how it's going to end? And I think that is kind of really plaguing the Jets' mentality right now. Winnipeg is so used to disappointment, so used to the same cycles, so used to doing things their way currently, and it leading to the same results that it doesn't really feel like Bones' messaging and his initial push has carried over into the second half of the season. That for me is a disappointment and a shame because that first half of the season, it felt like Winnipeg might actually start learning some things, might change a few things around, and Bones is going to have to wear some of this, right? He broke up some really good lines. He's played players who maybe weren't as talented as some of their teammates, and he has elevated those guys into major roles when other players like Nikolai Ehlers have seen reduced ice time. So Bones has to wear this too. But for the players, some days I don't blame them. Obviously they have a lot of responsibilities and they are kind of beholden to the fact that they have to live up to their contracts. But other days I'm just like, you know what? If I were in their shoes, I would not give a crap at all on some of these games. And that's sad to say. This Jets team should feel like it fights for every shift. It should reflect the spirit of the city, and it doesn't. And that, for me, is always going to be a disappointment. Now, I also want to talk about the other side of this, in terms of what the players really should be doing and whether or not, one of these two sides has more, I guess, blame in all of this or not. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at Indeed. No matter how the last game won, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed. If you're hiring, you need Indeed because they provide the ultimate hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one single place. Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements or else you don't pay a dime. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process. You can find great talent through time-saving tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. With Instant Match, as soon as you find a suitable candidate from one of your sponsored posts that matches your qualifications, they are invited to apply immediately. That makes it a super powerful tool. I've personally used Indeed when I was an applicant myself. It was very straightforward, very to the point, and a very convenient service for applying to jobs. So if you are trying to actually hire, this is your chance to get in on all of the action. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. The offer is valid through March 31st, so do not delay. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now to claim your $75 credit. And again, do so before March 31st. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are just continuing our conversation about Winnipeg's motivation levels. Rick Bowness calling the team out, saying they weren't, fighting hard enough among certain players. And I think we all know who he's talking about, right? Maybe it was Scheifele, maybe it was Wheeler. There are some guys that I think would be fair culprits, even if it might just be that they actually are trying hard, but they're just bad at their jobs in some respects. Because, in Wheeler's case, he's just getting older. I don't really ever question Wheeler's effort and fight. That guy wants to basically die for the badge. It's just he physically can't keep up, which is tough because I know what he wants to do, and you can see him thinking about it and knowing in his head how to get from point A to point B. But it's just doing that's been the challenge. So in other cases, I don't know if we can really say that. I think there are players on this team who maybe have taken a few shifts off, maybe haven't backchecked as aggressively as they should, maybe haven't always lived up to their responsibilities. And I think those players set a poor example for a lot of the kids. When you hear Nikolai Ehlers or even Neil Pionk, who's had a horrible season this year, even still, when they're talking about accountability, how they feel about their performance, those guys are usually very upfront and honest. Ehlers, in particular, has always been very, I think, hard on himself, in part because he expects greatness and he knows what he's capable of. He's seen how explosive of a player he can be. And yet he's one of the guys who often gets punished with his ice time, whether it's because he's viewed as undersized or undisciplined or something. I really couldn't tell you. But then you see a player like Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler, and some of these other guys who are quite honestly struggling on the ice, and yet their ice time almost never really sees a decline. And so I feel like that just reinforces bad behaviors. If you're not going to bench guys, if you're not going to send a message, you kind of reap what you sow. And I think in a lot of ways, Scheifele is used to being the most important attacker on the ice when he's out there, right? He is the big dog, one of the number ones on this team. Is he the most impactful player on the team? No, but he's darn near close, right? Maybe a close second in terms of his true power and prowess. We all know that at his best, he really was the best player on this team and an absolute force to be reckoned with. But since then, you see those lackadaisical back checks. You see some of the poor passes and general, I don't know, stiffness to his game that he's had over the past couple of years. This season started off very differently, right? He was a beast to start the year. He was racing back and forth. He looked active and engaged. He looked like he was enjoying hockey again, which is kind of a rarity with this team because everyone looked like they hated playing for the Jets the past few years. There were only a couple of players who, really wanted to keep fighting for the badge. I mean, Logan Stanley just asked for a trade this year. That's kind of the level that we're at. But with Scheifele, right, at some point you're also going to have to be very honest with your own performance. And I think with Scheifele, he would probably admit that if you really drilled him and pressed him about what he does on the ice, whether he openly admits it or not, I think he would in some ways confirm that, yeah, he doesn't always put 100% out there. And I don't think anyone should ask that of players, right? It's a nice expectation. It's a nice thing to dream about. But sometimes you got to take a shift off. Sometimes you kind of have to slow down a little bit. And I think that is kind of important, right? You have to know when you shouldn't go full bore. It's important not to be pushing 100% when you are running out of energy and need to preserve some energy. So I think it's important for Winnipeg to be engaged and active, but don't ask guys to do stuff that's unrealistic. But otherwise, I really think we need to see more from some of these players. I think they all can be capable of so much more. I think this team really can be special. I think the Jets have shown us so much better than we've seen at times. But right now, the streak that they're mired in, the struggles that they've had, it just feels like there's not an end to this tunnel in sight. I think Winnipeg is most likely going to have a very short playoff trip. I think we're going to see Winnipeg ultimately fall short. And will anybody be shocked? No. I think we all know how this story ends because we've seen it about 1,000 times already. And it's a shame because I'd love to be able to rewrite that narrative. But let me know your thoughts on this whole motivation thing. Who do you think is more at fault? Do you think the blame is equal? Drop your thoughts and comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Before we get too much further, though, I do want to talk about the Anaheim Ducks and the Jets game that is currently about to kick off. Obviously, this episode's recorded a little bit later than usual. Apologies, I have life things going on, so once in a while we have a later start. But the game will probably be, partway through by the time I get this up there through the first period. So hopefully the Jets have scored a bit, but I kind of want to talk about Winnipeg taking care of business and getting through these games, because we are like 9 games away now from the end of the season, and it doesn't feel like Winnipeg is as in control of its destiny as it should be. Now, before we go any further, though, I did want to shout out our friends and partners at FanDuel. March Madness is heating up, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. But right now, you can get a great offer as a new customer with FanDuel's no sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. All you have to do is just go to fanduel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no sweat first bet. You can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which teams will be cutting down the net. It's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to fanduel.com/lockedon right now. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are just wrapping up really quickly with some thoughts on Winnipeg versus Anaheim. This game, I think if the Jets are really playing seriously, shouldn't be too much of a problem, although I do suspect that Winnipeg is going to likely have trouble scoring. I mean, it's been a theme over the past couple of weeks that the Jets just don't score goals. I know that we talk about Winnipeg not getting in dangerous areas, not finding those high danger chances in the low slot, but even when the Jets have been there, how often have they really scored? It's quite honestly been rather infrequent, and I think for the Jets, it's been a frustrating season, especially over the last couple of weeks. But here's an opportunity for the Jets to get 2 points. If you're asking for a rebound game, something that's not too taxing after a surprisingly difficult win against the Arizona Coyotes, I can't believe I'm saying it was difficult, but it was. I guess the Ducks are an easy opponent. Anaheim is one of the worst teams in the NHL this year. It's not the worst. I think Columbus might have a worse record, something like that. But suffice it to say, the Ducks have been down in the dumps for a while, and I think Anaheim would love nothing more than to put a dent in Winnipeg's playoff hopes, especially after some of their rivalries over the past couple of years. For me, if the Jets are playing seriously, this really shouldn't be a particularly difficult contest, but I know that that's not always been the case with Winnipeg. We've seen games in which the Jets really should have been greasing through opponents and playing better, and it just didn't happen that way. Now, I suppose the good news is that Winnipeg probably could have had like 3 or 4 more goals in their previous game if a bounce had gone a little bit differently, if Kyle Connor actually capitalized on the billion chances he had. Um, but I guess the biggest question I have is, will Winnipeg rip open the slot? Will they get down low and cause havoc? Because when they do that, that is when Winnipeg is successful. You get that zone pressure, you get those rotations and overlapping skating routes, you have guys switching assignments. It creates all sorts of confusing looks, and suddenly your opponents don't know what to do. And it doesn't even have to be something where the Jets rely on speed. There are other ways to get that puck movement going, even if you have skating legs that kind of look like a snail. And I think with the Jets, we all know that this team is a little bigger and heavier and slower, which is not a problem, right? As long as you have good puck movement, you have the ability to progress the puck up the ice and get it to dangerous areas. That's the most important part. And I think for the Jets, they're still missing that sometimes, right? Still not there. We saw it earlier this year, but now they're looking a little more timid. They're not playing to their strengths. And I feel like that for me, it just sucks. I mean, I really want to see this team do well. I want to see them score goals. I want to see them be offensively ambitious. And there are moments where they show that. But recently, it's not been happening the way it needs to. And so this game, I really hope is a return to form for the Jets. I'd love for them to get on the board early, really push the advantage, and just kind of remind people of why the Jets are in a playoff spot and the Ducks are not. Let me know your score predictions. I'm going to go with, 4-1 Winnipeg, but I predicted a Jets win a couple of games ago, and it was actually a loss. So maybe I should just shut up, but drop your score predictions in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen today. Make your second listen game-to-game NHL. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across hockey with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your favorite podcasts. As always, I am your host, Harrison Lee. Thanks for listening. Have a great night, and go Jets, go.